Welcome to the College Admission TV podcast. Join us for insights from education leaders on today's academic landscape. We are excited to have as our guest Andy Benis, Chief of Staff of Los Angeles Pacific University in San Dimas, California.
So, hey, a question that I always like to start with is I do want to start with you. And I'd love to understand who are the mentors that helped shape your path to where you are today?
Wow, that is a long and assorted list. Includes multiple industries and more time than I probably want to admit. Um, a lot of what's interesting is some of those folks were, supervisors and managers and bosses along the way, especially earlier on when you're kind of young and impressionable, and you get somebody who's a good leader, a good manager, and sort of the right blend of challenging you and encouraging you. And I had a few of those along the way. I think my very first touch with higher education specifically was actually on the periphery. I had a long stint with the Princeton Review, the test prep and kind of college admissions company, and down here in Orange County. So actually, while I was still an undergrad at UC Irvine, one of my part-time jobs was teaching the SAT to high school kids. And it was super flexible schedule, great money for the hours. So it was kind of a glorified tutoring thing, but it was all around the SAT and the panic around college admissions, from so many young folks and their parents. Can't forget, most of the panic is coming from the parents. But that was sort of my first foray into higher ed, and had a great boss there, Paul Kanarak, who ran the Orange County and LA franchises for a while. But he was great at sort of helping parents put things in perspective. And I learned a lot by watching him talk to parents about the whole college admissions process and, what to focus on, what not to worry about, all that stuff. But he was also a fun boss. That was a great experience. But anyway, there's a ton of names moving through, my time at DeVry University and a lot of names in there. John Kolosinski was a boss of mine for a long time, later became a college president elsewhere, who were just a good balance of, hey, this is our mission. This is what we're here to accomplish. Here's how I see you contributing best, right? Your gifts, your talents. And so any of the folks along the way who did that all had an influence. It's hard to say I've had one life mentor, that didn't really exist in that form. It was peers, colleagues, friends outside the industry. I'm lucky enough to know a lot of folks who are very successful in their respective industries, some business owners and some other executive level guys who, as I was kind of moving up the ranks in my world, were helping with the, hey, here's the stuff that's worth sweating over. Here's the stuff that's not. At the end of the day, it all boils down to X, right? All the bumper sticker wisdom we get from different people in our lives. So I've been truly blessed. There've been a lot of folks along the way. In the end, that includes my wife. To be honest, spend more time with her than either mentor. But she's been a great mirror personally and professionally as I've sort of grown and sought to challenge myself. She also knows where to jab more than most people do, right?
Yeah,
to drive the point home. But
well, and let's talk a little bit about the history of Los Angeles Pacific University.
Mhm.
So talk to us a little bit about how long have you been there? But can you talk about the origin of LAPU and
Yeah.
having it be a part of the Azusa
Right.
Pacific system? But again, you can answer that a lot more eloquently than I
No,
can.
I mean there's a nutshell version and there's a really long version. So to just keep it to the nutshell version, the history goes back to 1899 and 1903. There were two institutions that had kind of a parallel history until 1965 when they merged. So in 1965, Los Angeles Pacific College, which was the first private community college, eventually then became a four-year college. LA Pacific College and Azusa College merged. So the boards of directors got together and they merged the two institutions, and they decided to keep the Azusa from Azusa College and the Pacific from LA Pacific. And that's where you got Azusa Pacific at that time, Azusa Pacific College. And then in like 81 or 2, it became Azusa Pacific University. And that history grew for decades and is the Azusa Pacific we know today. In 2010-11, for that school year, they launched Azusa Pacific Online University, which was their effort to make a private Christian higher education more accessible to more people, because with online came lower overhead, no dorms, no athletic department and all that. So you were able to keep it a little more efficient. Then a few years later, they rolled in the School of Adult and Professional Studies, and that included some of those remote centers, the remote regional campuses. And then they thought, well, can't really call it online if it includes the regional centers. So they pivoted again and called it University College at Azusa Pacific University. That started around 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And that continued for a while. I started with University College while I was at University College at APU in 2016. At time's flying, so I have to check my dates. And that was about the time we started to realize we operate so differently institutionally that there was the occasional friction, not friction from a personality standpoint, but more just operationally. We had our own IT department, our own faculty, our own HR department, our own, every student success and enrollment. So everything operated almost entirely independently, except for the brand and some of the stuff as employees. We were all considered one unit for things like benefits and whatnot. But the powers that be at that point decided there are too many things that are different. For example, our start dates. We have rolling admissions. We do 3 full semesters a year that are broken into 2 8-week sessions. So we run 6 8-week sessions a year, and new students can start in any one of them. So there were some operational differences that made it clear this would probably be smoother if we just separated. So in 2018, we pursued and received our own separate regional accreditation as a separate institution. And then we rebirthed that Los Angeles Pacific name that disappeared in 1965 to become Los Angeles Pacific University. But, we're a separate 501c3 nonprofit institution, but APU is our sole member. And so we are sister schools, if you will, in a way. But we operate similar mission and focus. We're both Christian universities. We're both open to students of all faiths. The faith requirement is a staff and faculty thing, not a student thing, because we want it to be open to everyone. But we operate so differently that we sort of spun off. And so that's the long and short origin. Obviously, there's a whole more involved history, video linked through our website, but that's the large nutshell version.
So when you look at and I'm sure it varies, but when you look at the profile of an online student, can you give us a sense of who is that student that, again, what's that snapshot of an online student?
Sure.
And also, how do they excel?
Yeah, and I'll start vague and get more specific. I think in general, online has thrived as the most beneficial fit for the non-traditional learner, right? The non-18 to 22-year-old. They've done some college and either life got in the way or they had to go to work or they started a family and they just some credits, no credential, right? That's a huge population in the US. I mean, at this point, upwards of 40 million people who have some college but no credential. In other words, no completed degree. And that's who's best served with online. For us specifically, as obviously the name would imply, and our history with Azusa Pacific, being Southern California based, still 90% of our students are in California and the overwhelming majority of those in Southern California. So we specifically mirror the SoCal demographic pretty well. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that our demographic reflects Southern California's overall demographic way more than a traditional private Christian university would. So our average persona, if you will, is 34 years old. We're about 75% female, 54% Hispanic, again, mirroring Southern California. So we sort of reflect the demographics of a California state university almost more than another private Christian university. And again, that was by design. Our mission and our vision both include specific statements about removing the barriers of accessibility and affordability. So hence the online platform to keep it flexible. And we're very aggressive about keeping our tuition low. And so we've been at or below, state school pricing, but with the kind of quality and personal service and attention of a private Christian university. So that's sort of become our niche in the online space.
Yeah, and when you look at that, and I think you touched upon this, as far as the starts and the length of time it takes to complete a degree. Can you talk about the benefits that a non-traditional adult learner has in going online, and that flexibility of that schedule,
Mhm.
when they can start and when they can stop?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I think the ability to start and stop throughout the, and I'll address it from a couple of different points of view. There's the year-round schedule, and then there's how does online work in general. The problem with when you say online, for a lot of folks, like post-COVID, there are a lot of college students that have PTSD over what happened by remote learning, right? Distance learning. It basically was taking a lecture, a class that was delivered in a lecture hall, take the PowerPoint, throw it online, and it just became this online mess of attempting to do what was in the classroom, but doing it remotely. Just didn't have the engagement, didn't have the interaction, didn't have the technology behind it to really make it a good experience for a lot of people. So when we say online, we mean, learning management systems that are specifically designed to engage with students through the technology, right? It's not just PowerPoint and Zoom. It's way more than that. So think social media wrapped up with, online learning like Khan Academy, wrapped up with, interaction profiles and video like Zoom. And it's a much larger package and it's a lot more thorough. So I think it's important people separate in their minds when you say online learning. We
Yeah.
don't all have the same definition of that. So dig a little deeper when you hear that as to what that means, because there are students in lecture hall or in-class live in-person classes that have an online component, and those are what you'd call hybrid, and then some that are fully online. So LAPU as a fully online institution, we are completely focused on the learning aspect of this. How do we set up the course in a way that people learn best? Not just, hey, I'm a professor, I'm an expert in my field, I wrote this book, it's going to be our textbook, I'm going to lecture on it, you're going to take notes, memorize things, and then in essays and tests, you're going to prove what you know. We sort of flip that around and be like, look, you've got a goal of getting through this course and having some key takeaways that prepare you for your career, either a new career or you want to get promoted, whatever it is. So it's got to be applicable, it's got to be relevant, but the student has to be able to engage with it in a way that's meaningful for them. So it's got to be more than just watching videos. The flexibility comes when you add a layer of what we'd call asynchronous, meaning there's no set class times. It's not, hey, we're jumping into Zoom on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 o'clock every week. Well, if you're picking up kids, dropping off kids, can't get off work, whatever, that's not going to work for you. And then you're going to have to watch a recording of the Zoom recording. And you're again removed from the process. Instead, it's asynchronous where all that stuff, whether it's videos, recorded lectures, conversations with faculty, they happen when you are available. So if you're going to watch a video, whether you watch it at 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. is totally up to you. If you're going to jump onto the discussion forums and interact with your fellow students, almost in a social media style interaction, you want to do it, in real time, you want to do it after the fact, you can do it anytime you want. So we have assignments and deadlines, but they're more like weekly deadlines, not you got to be here at 3 p.m. You got to have this in by noon tomorrow. So there's a lot more flexibility. Here's the syllabus. Here's what we expect of you. When you do it, totally up to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that must help out with retention or persistence as well.
For sure. And that's another one of those, higher ed buzzwords when it's like statistics. It totally depends on who's putting them together and how they define the terms, right? Retention and persistence are different for different groups of students. You've got your first-time full-time student. That's traditionally your 18-year-old freshman coming into college, and how they persist, semester over semester, year over year. When you move to the non-traditional student, if you compare that student to a traditional 18 to 22-year-old, the numbers are typically way worse because, like I said, life gets in the way. Work, right? Family obligations. We go year round, like I mentioned. We've got a lot of students who say, hey, my kids are out of school. I know myself. I'm not going to be able to concentrate for the summer semester, so I'm going to take that off and come back in the fall. Or, hey, you've got summer 1 session and a summer 2 session. I'm going to do summer 1. I'm going to skip summer 2 because that's when our family vacation is, and I'll pick back up in fall 1. And then, oh, you know what? My mom just fell and broke her hip and we're her caretakers. So I'm going to take off fall 2 and I'll rejoin in spring 1. So that kind of start stop on paper, that wreaks havoc with retention and persistence rates the way a traditional residential campus would measure it. But for our students, it's awesome because we're not kicking them out of school because they've missed a session or two or even a semester or two. Um, that's deliberate and it's by design. But you and I know this, higher ed is so traditional in so many ways. And the report, I mean, we're so highly regulated from the federal level on down that some terms are very strictly defined and they don't
Mhm.
leave a lot of leeway. Or you've got asterisk, double asterisk, triple asterisk, where you got to go down to the footer and read the exception to the rule as to why. But most of your fully online institutions recognize if you're serving a non-traditional, again, non-18 to 22-year-old straight from high school type student, there's exceptions all over the place. Our norm is the exception, right? That's our normal
Right.
population is the exception. We exist to make life a little easier for them. Sometimes we call ourselves the University of Second Chances or second and third chances because they've tried to do the community college thing, just couldn't get it going. They've tried maybe the four-year institution thing, just couldn't make the schedule work, or they've tried and failed, and now they're so gun shy. They're so scarred by what they went through. They're starting to doubt themselves and their ability to get through school. And we are all about turning that upside down. It's like, look, of course you can succeed. It's a question of where. So do it
Yes.
in a place that sets a foundation of, making it easier on you. So we try to structure things in a way that is the most beneficial to the student. We want to do things on their terms, not ours. So it's very much a customer focused, right? It's a little more of a customer centric business model. And I know there's folks in higher ed who hate the terms customer and business, but let's face it, if you're paying tuition, that's revenue. If you're
Yeah,
spending that tuition
that's
to pay your
right.
professors, that's, salary. Those are expenses. So you can use whatever terms you want, but that's what it is. But
Yeah.
our model is all about being customer focused, student centric, in a way that means we make it easier on them. We don't make them turn their lives upside down to fit our model.
Well, and are you seeing, trends as far as degrees? Are there certain degrees that are more popular than others?
Mhm.
And also, kind of tied to that, are you seeing a lot of students that are getting a certificate versus an undergrad degree versus a grad degree?
Um, I look, so many schools have their specialties, right? Especially if you're a regional local school. If you go for, a 10-year stretch, having a really strong program, maybe it's because the dean is particularly strong, or you've got some kind of corporate partnership that brings real world in really powerfully. So you get a reputation for something, right? Some of those stick, for decades. For us, whether you go back to the Azusa Pacific days or just as LA Pacific, our strongest verticals, and when I say vertical, I mean area of study, not necessarily one degree, right? Um, we sort business, kind of management, leadership, like organizational leadership, which we differentiate from strict business, because it has to do with running nonprofits and the umbrella is a little larger. Um, Psychology, and the health sciences. We've got a number all the way from associates through, master's degrees and things like as specialized as public health or public administration through down to the associates of science and health sciences. But there's a pretty healthy mix of folks who aren't even pursuing a degree. So we've got a category of non-degree seeking or kind of certificate or specialty seeking folks. I'll give you an example. A number of folks who come just for pre-nursing health science courses. So there's a core group of health science courses that are needed before you can be admitted to a nursing program, right? We've got a ton of folks who come to us just specifically for that 4-course sequence and then transfer it to another nursing program. We've got a project with Kaiser Permanente, one of their foundations, a memorial trust that helps students get that foundational coursework so they can get into a nursing program. Um, and they send us tons of students every session just to get through that 4-course sequence. So there's a huge span, non-degree seeking, associates, bachelor's, masters. We've got a pretty healthy number of folks that transfer in credits from previous institutions. Sometimes it's just from one community college. Sometimes it's from like 2 community colleges, 2, 4-year schools because they moved or, they stopped out. So we're constantly evaluating transcripts from other institutions to give folks as much credit as we possibly can to just get them closer to competing as quickly as possible.
So, what are the top couple of questions that you hear from students, or maybe even better yet, What are the concerns? When
Yeah.
students are looking to, go back to school in
Yeah. Yeah.
general, and especially as an adult learner, non-traditional student, what are they concerned about?
Sure, sure. Well, I've been on the enrollment and marketing side of this long enough to know that answer instantaneously. How much and how long? This is about, for the non-traditional folks, typically they're either trying to change careers or they're trying to get promoted within their field, whatever they're doing now. And so the education becomes a means to an end. As soon as I've got that degree and the skills that go with it, I'm going to get promoted, or I'm going to be able to get my foot in the door in a new career. So they want to know, where can I take this bucket of all this stuff I've done and just apply it, right? So you look at the some of the folks who did that originally, like University of Phoenix. They were known for having super liberal transfer policies, right? Like, we'll take anything you've done from almost anywhere and give you some kind of elective credit for it and get you that much closer to degree. So they became known as sort of a degree completion diploma mill. Some of that had a negative connotation. Some of it was deserved, some of it wasn't. But they were tapping a need, which was, I need to just get through this quickly. Now they got knocked for academic rigor and quality. And again, some of that's justified, some of it's not. But how long is a huge question. They're busy. They can't afford to be in school for another 6 years. They just want to get through it. So how long? And then, of course, how much? There's a lot of hypersensitivity, especially, I mean, you and I sitting here in 2024, inflation is a thing. The cost of everything is a thing. And so people are looking for value. I'm not willing to pay $50,000 a year to sit under a tree, play guitar, and find myself. I want to get in, get out, get going. How do I do that? And so at LA Pacific, for example, I mean, it's in our mission, it's in our vision statement. We're very deliberate about keeping tuition as low as possible. And so per credit hour, like I said, on a full-time, like 24 units is considered a full-time academic year. We come in at the same price as a Cal State, as a state school. Well, and again, why? No athletic department, right? No dorms, no 27 building campus to maintain and air condition. So when you remove that overhead and your primary investment is in faculty and student services and the folks who are directly involved in making the university run, you can run a lot more lean and mean. And so people are like, wait a minute, how do you deliver, a private Christian higher education experience for that little? That's the answer. It's bare bones, lean and mean, and therefore the only, not only, the primary focus is the quality of the education, the educational experience, the interaction with faculty, the ability to reach your faculty directly, by phone, by email, by chat, by whatever you want. Everybody's got a personal success coach. That's our kind of student support model. Our success coaches are part academic advisor, right? What courses do I take and in what order and when? Part just encouragement, part tech support. Hey, I can't log into such and such, or I'm having trouble reaching my professor. Do I have the wrong email address or the wrong phone number? So there's sort of a one-stop shop kind of concierge, if you will. But that person's assigned to an incoming student, their first session, and stays with them all the way through graduation. And that's sort of a level of service that I think some people come to expect when you're talking about a private, university, but is delivered almost more efficiently, but in a different way than a traditional residential campus, because you don't have to go to the student services building.
Yeah.
Just jump online and start chatting. You can email, chat, text, call, whatever. There's 6 different ways to reach these people. And most of our folks really appreciate that because they're not in school for traditional hours.
Well, I think when you look at the quality of education and just what you're speaking to is the engagement.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I think that engagement is so critical because I don't, you know better than I do about the perceptions, but I think there are some that think, well, if I'm in a classroom, face to face, gosh, I'll be able to engage better than if I do it in this other learning format, which I don't think is correct.
No, it isn't. And I think a lot of folks will tell you, even you're getting down now with AI and in-classroom tools, this will start to change very quickly. The flipped classroom model. Hey, go watch this, go read this ahead of time. Then when you come to class, we get into a rich discussion about what you're reading and seeing and learning and what you're thinking. And that's where the discussion forums come in, is like, hey, we're all digesting the content whenever and wherever, however we can. Then when we get together, or you're interacting with faculty or fellow students, it's a discussion about what you're learning, not sitting there like a robot taking notes. Okay, now I got to go. I took all this time to be in class. Now I got to go home and reread it, memorize it, and either write a paper or do this test next week. You're discussing it on your terms and in real time. So how you absorb that is a big deal. Now, I use the buzzword like of 2024, AI. Cannot read an article or watch a YouTube video without the phrase AI somewhere embedded in it. So might as well address it. We just launched, for example, an AI tool that is what we're calling a course assistant. We named it Spark. We had a little internal contest to decide what to call it. It's basically an AI course assistant that's been rolled out into every single course. And rather than digesting the entire World Wide Web, it basically, I digest all the materials relevant to the course, the text, any supplemental materials, videos, papers, whatever. And students can just go interact. Hey, I'm a little confused about this concept. Explain it to me like I was 15 years old, you know? And it's kind of like if anybody's played with Chat GPT or with Gemini or any of those other tools, it's very conversational and always ends with another question. Hey, does that help? Or, hey, what do you think about this particular part of it? Or, hey, you know, you can go to it with anything and everything related to that course in your time, at your pace, for as long or as little as you want. So whether in Psych 300 or in some business class, you can, it's almost like having a course tutor available to you 24/7. So if you're not likely to post a question in a class forum, because I don't want to be the idiot with that question that I think is simple, ask whatever you want, whenever you want. With the AI, you know, you're interacting with it 24/7. So we've rolled that out as a supplement, not to replace the instructor, not to replace, you know, the text or the videos, the curriculum, any of that. It's a supplement. And it knows what you're reading and watching and doing. So it will constantly, hey, remember earlier in the course, we talked about X. Well, that relates here because of Y. And so you can get into all kinds of discussions that are relevant to that class specifically, but every course has it. So they get to interact. Again, I'm bringing this up. They interact on their terms, not ours. We're not telling them this is how you need to learn. We're telling them here are some tools that will let you learn at your pace and in your way. But we find that in every aspect. We launched a mobile app, which is kind of the hub. If you don't have a campus, where do students go? Well, the app, it's called MyLAPU, super creative, I know. But it's an app that includes access to their courses, so student services, you know, links to a million things. But probably the most popular part of it has turned out to be the social feed. There's almost kind of an Instagram or Facebook-like social feed where every student, regardless of major, is in, and they get to sort of post questions. Hey, does anybody, you know, what are your do's and don'ts for this course? Hey, does anyone have an extra textbook for this class? Or they can talk courses, they can talk life. We've got groups, kind of like you would on a social media platform. You know, we've got a moms group for students that are moms and students. So they're in there to support each other, just talk life, post pictures of their kids, or post picture of, you know, their dog at their feet. I mean, you name it, but the interactions happening there is so organic and so powerful that just like you or I would put our feet up on the coffee table and scroll Instagram for a while, they're doing that in their MyLAPU app. And oh, by the way, they can jump over to the courses and look at their coursework, look at the syllabus, read something, watch something, go back to the social feed, put it down for the night, whatever. But those tools have got to be there in 2024 to help students get a more robust experience out of this thing.
Well, especially now when, you know, students will expect that. You know, it's such a great, all of these tools are great because, to your point, you're meeting students where they are. They're tailored for that student, which is great. But now there's also that expectation as well.
No, there is. And because we're going multi-generational now, I mean, I talked about our average age, but that, you know, on average is creeping down, because now you're talking about the younger half of the millennials and Gen Z. They're complete digital natives. They don't know life without a screen. They don't know life without social media on their phones. That kicked in around what, 08, 09, when Facebook hit the iPhone for the first time and changed everything about everything, right? The way we do life now, the way we interact socially has completely changed. But as those folks grow up and start doing college, they're like, wait, I went from being able to, you know, order food on my app track it all the way to my door, like knowing when it's arriving within minutes. And you're telling me I have to drive to campus, park, walk, find the building, find the classroom, be in my seat at a specific time just to hear this guy talk? Like, that kind of thinking is running totally counter to this generation. And that's why you're seeing some of the friction. And by the way, this is not to demean the traditional residential experience. There's a ton of personal and social value to it. But from a learning standpoint, those are the things they're thinking. Why can't this be more like the rest of my life, where I do everything as a combination of digital and in person, but mostly digital until I see you again? Why do I have to go see the professor in person? Why don't you find the best person to teach this, who's got real world experience, who doesn't have to be able to drive to the campus because just doesn't happen to live in this state? Okay. You know.
And so how are you engaging with alumni?
It's interesting, we are, but it's different. And I want to try to put this in context. You got to realize that when folks come to a fully online institution to advance their career, to get that degree, get the skills, and advance their career, the university isn't as much a part of their identity as it is for a traditional student. And what I mean by that is, for the 18 to 22-year-old, and I remember this, by the fall of my senior year, when I knew where I was going and why, I bought the sweatshirt. I bought my parents the sweatshirt, and we were all walking around with the sweatshirt with the school on it, University of California. I was all loud and proud. And that was and back then, UCI had a great basketball team, so I was going to the games. We didn't have football, so I could root for whoever I want in college football. But that experience becomes a huge chunk of your identity. So engagement on social media is way more robust because you're talking about sports and campus life and stuff. Fast forward to a 35-year-old who's working on an MBA.
Yeah.
They're not engaging the same way. So once they've graduated, other than maybe some networking, they're ready to move on. So for us, that takes the shape of career services and resources, right? Hey, I haven't practiced my interviewing skills for a while. How's that done in 2024? What does a resume look like in 2024, right? So our career services platform revolves around, again, on-demand resources for mock interviews, brushing up the resume, networking, and then, of course, links to our job boards, right? So you got your industry-specific job listings. It's way more practical for us because I don't mean the word pejoratively, but they're using us as a means to an end. Fine, let them. Let's go ahead and give that to them. So if you're asking me to compare our alumni association to USC, not the same thing. But it's a different vehicle for a different set of goals, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Now, where do you see LA Pacific in 5 years, 10 years?
You ask me to read a crystal ball that is changing daily, right? That's like, hey, tell me what Chat GPT 5 is going to be able to do.
Exactly. That's right.
Can't.
Well, you can't answer that. Come on.
I'd be sitting in a much bigger office with a much better view if I had the answers to all those questions. This would be oceanfront, footage. Look, I think the trend that's going to continue is the need to meet students where they are. On-demand, personalized education. I'm just finishing Sal Khan's book, Brave New Words, and it's all about, but he's the guy from Khan Academy, and they've launched this Khanmigo platform that is AI enabled to benefit teachers from lesson planning, students, because they've got this AI-based tutor, a little bit like what I described we've got in our courses, but in his case on a larger scale. But I think you're heading towards a demand for personalized, customized, AI-driven education that delivers content in real time, customized to the person and what they're learning, what they're doing well, what they're not doing. I'll give you a silly example. Our family trip this year, well, my wife and I, family, we're going to Italy this year, right? So I'm on Duolingo. If anybody's ever used the Duolingo app to learn a language, it's tracking very much the way an AI would, what I'm doing well and what I'm not doing well. So it's going to give me more exercises to practice the things I'm not quite as good at yet. And it's going to dial down the stuff that I've already mastered. And then it's just going to introduce it in context. And it's going to work with me where I am to get me along and get me more proficient faster. We're headed there for all of higher ed, every industry, every subject. The expectation is going to be that somebody's tracking my progress, giving me customized feedback. And then if I log in 2 weeks later and pick up a conversation where it left off, it's going to remember exactly what we've talked about, what we've done, what I'm good at, right? This logging, this tracking, and a tool or a tutor almost that's going to follow your entire degree. Hey, you did really well in this course. Remember way back when, and some of those skills are going to follow you into this course, something that's going to be with you for the life of the degree. Any platform or model for instruction that isn't going to somehow incorporate those things is going to fall further and further behind in the next 5 years. I mean, we might be talking a year or two. Some will figure it out, master it, and we'll just run away from those who haven't.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be a wild ride. That's all I can tell you. That's my only prediction. I predict a wild ride. Everything else is up for grabs.
Well, Andy Benis, hey, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate the great insight.
No, you bet, Brad. Fun to hang with you. Good stuff. Anytime.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the College Admission TV Presidential Podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll bring you another insightful conversation with a distinguished leader in higher education.